is what flows in this fam's DNA. Dope is what flows in this fam's DNA.
What's good, everybody? Welcome to Dope Interviews, brought to you by the Mighty 19 Media Group. I'm your host, Warren Shaw, and in the virtual building today, I have an Emmy-winning director who's living his life to the fullest. My guy, Jason Gallagher. Jason, welcome to Dope Interviews, brother. It's so nice to see you.
Hey, thanks for asking me to come on. I appreciate it.
Listen, a person of your talent and ilk, you're gracing our platform. You've done some really, really amazing things in the media space. And I really am excited to kind of have people hear your story and listen to what you've been able to accomplish in the time and what you're looking to do next as well. But before we get into all of that, right? So we are diametrically opposed. At least we were in June, because I'm a Boston Celtics fan. And so Boston Celtics played the Dallas Mavericks in the NBA Finals. You are a Dallas Mavericks fan, and proudly so. Talk to me a little bit about that. You know, have you always been a Dallas Mavericks fan? When did it all kind of start for you in that lane specifically?
Sure. I'm a real Dallas fan through and through across the board. I was born and raised in Dallas, so
Okay.
I unfortunately am a Dallas Cowboys fan as well.
Oh, sorry, brother.
But when you live in Dallas, especially growing up in the 90s, and you have an interest in basketball, obviously, I was like any other kid that age. I loved Michael Jordan and I loved, whatever. And the Mavericks were not very successful, but I remember my dad used to take me to Mavericks games when I was little, because he quote unquote said they was cheaper than going to the movies. And so we would go to old Mavericks games at this old arena called Reunion Arena, and we would watch them lose most of the time. But when they started to get better, Michael Finley started entering the fold. Then, Dirk and Nash and Cuban bought the team. There was a lot of excitement there, especially in the early 2000s. And when you think about like being a basketball fan in Cowboys Nation, you feel like you're a part of a little club. Like you feel like you're a fan of the band before they blow up.
Right.
And obviously, the ascendance of Dirk's career was really fun to follow. He was a really easy guy to cheer for, because he was so, he's so good to fans. He was pretty humble. His story was really great. Like, obviously the failures and overcoming all that in 2011. And so
sure.
I've always been a Mavericks fan, and I think I'll always be a Mavericks fan. So.
And nothing wrong with that at all. And obviously Dallas is in a great space right now. Obviously finals appearance last year, this past summer, and right on pace to be really influential in the Western Conference again this year. So did your Mavericks fandom feed or lead you into the media and journalistic space? How did you get from, being a fan in Dallas to kind of doing even some of the stuff that you're doing now?
Yeah. So I actually have a really, really weird story as to how I got into media. So I'm also a theater kid, which is like a really important part of this story, which is I did theater growing up. I was a very artistic person. I did choir. I wrote music. I did all sorts of stuff. And so actually, but I'm a huge sports fan. And I've always thought, and like my former business partner, JJ Redick, and we used to talk about how we love the game in such different ways. Like I loved it because I believe that there's like, it's like almost artistic in a way. And these athletes, and they're putting their stories out for the public to see, and then they're being vulnerable every night so everyone can evaluate it. I think there's something like Shakespearean about it. So I say all that to say, when I was in college, I dropped out of college and I moved to Chicago to pursue sort of more comedy and staged production.
Really?
So I started a staged production company with a buddy of mine called 6 Hours Short. And it was a way in which we can put other comedians' performances on stage, but then our own. And the thing that really took off for myself was I co-wrote a musical about the NBA lockout in 2011. And it was about 2.5 hours long, but it got a lot of publicity. It got a lot of buzz that sort of put my name out there in very small circles, but the right circles. So like people at ESPN were really interested in it. It was a really crazy time. It was reviewed by like NPR. At one point they talked about it on Around the Horn, and they debated whether or not the musical would make it to Broadway. Like it really kind of like had a little moment. And it did pretty well and was successful. And through that, and through my name sort of starting to get out there, is when I, just started to be like, oh, okay, I can be a writer on the internet. It was a little bit of a transition, and that almost immediately led to Bill Simmons reaching out and just saying, you're a really unique and funny and weird writer. Come write for me. And that's how I got into sports media.
So from the play, what was the play called again?
It was called The Lockout, a musical.
So did you even fathom that that's the path that it could, that would take you, having your play debated on ESPN, like that's bananas, right? Like, so,
look, I knew the power of the internet, but I hadn't utilized it yet. And I think, I had a plan to we had a really unique marketing plan that was essentially, we're going to make a cast album first, and then we're going to send it to every sports writer we can possibly find and get any nuggets of anything. And that really was a successful thing. I did not think it would be as successful as it was. And I definitely didn't think it was going to lead to like the kind of career path I was on. But one of the things that I found really interesting that stayed very consistent for me in my career is that I really still love basketball kind of the same way that I did back then. And I think that when it comes to like entertainment and sports and all that other stuff, that's a lane that I think I really thrive in. Someone the other day asked me, do you always want to stay in sports? And it's like, I don't know, but I just know that there is a lot still to be untapped, and I do well there. And I think I look at it a little differently because, again, I don't think people, just for a brief premise, the Lockout, a musical, was almost like the NBA meets Romeo and Juliet, and it was inspired by the Mavericks, weirdly, because when they won the title, they went to the ESPYs, and a big storyline that year at the ESPYs was that Dirk Nowitzki and Mark Cuban were not allowed to talk to each other. Oh. Even though they were on cloud nine because of this lockout, they legally couldn't talk to each other. And it was funny, and it made me think of Romeo and Juliet. It made me think of like, what if an owner and a player got along really well and they just wanted to shoot hoops and talk about winning and all this other stuff, but they're not allowed to. And so it sort of sparked this, and it's obviously had a very comedic angle to it. But yeah, that's how I'm always sort of like looking at sports in a way. So
listen, Jason, so I'm just going to ask point blank, is it available anywhere for anybody to still consume here in 2024? Is it on YouTube or somewhere where it can be found, your website or anything like that?
Yeah. So the cast album is on Spotify. That's the best thing we can have. And I'll just say that, hey, it was made by a young 20-something-year-old.
You don't have to qualify, brother.
No. The only thing I want to qualify is that if I were to ever redo it, I would probably change some things, because I think that the biggest probably mistake I made was, well, one, the sound quality is not great, but two, some of the working with players now, it's actually a little mean towards players. So it probably would have been a little nicer. Like, it just kind of, I think I kind of like took the angle that they're a little spoiled, and I'm sure some fans feel that way now, but I certainly don't.
Yeah. I mean, and you're closer to it. I mean, and perspective is truly everything. Right. And I think even when I got into the space and started writing a little bit, my perspective changed. And I was like, all right, well, would I really want to write that? I mean, it's like, you're trying not to be biased per se, but it's like, I know this dude now, so
yeah, exactly. I'm super proud of it. And honestly, even the songs that I'm like, oh, I would change that. It's like, I'm proud because it's really hard to write a song. It's really hard to record a song and all that stuff. I don't have a lot of regrets. I just think if I were to ever update it, then I would probably just update some of the jokes. And it's like a few, but it's not really that many.
Yeah,
so
not too bad. Yeah. So you said Bill Simmons reached out. And obviously you spent some time at The Ringer as well too. I mean, these are some really notable sites in our sports ethos, if you will. Just talk a little bit about those experiences. And if you remember, kind of like, hey, your first big article, what was it? What was the assignment and how did it do?
Yeah. Okay. So through that musical, I had sort of been given advice by somebody at ESPN to start my own blog. And the blog was called Baller Ball. It is not, you cannot find it. It's off the internet, but it was called Baller Ball. And essentially what it was trying to do was I was trying to go viral every day. I was trying to take some sort of comedic lens. And I actually like weirdly worked with a lot of, comedy writers in Chicago at the time who have since made pretty good careers out of themselves. Like one guy's like a regular on an HBO show. Another guy is at The Ringer now. Another guy starts his own production company. So it was a pretty fun collection of people. Wow. But I was trying to, whatever. And I will never forget the article that made Bill reach out to me was actually this thing that I thought was so stupid. But Kanye West was tweeting really weird at the time, like really weird. And it like, yeah, I know. But like the sentences were really unstructured. And it was like, he would say a word and then like skip 10 spaces and then say the next word. And it rarely made any sense. Mm-hmm. And so it was like a really unique thing. And so I did a recap for a Bulls Heat game in the style in which Kanye writes. And it was like the most batch. It was crazy the way it was structured within a blog. Yeah. And Bill loved that. He was like, that's so weird. And so that's what kind of got me there. And what wound up happening. So that was at Grantland back when he was with ESPN. And so what wound up happening was I was on as a freelance writer there. And I had some pretty successful stuff. But I found myself to be very visual. I was like always accompanying my pieces with some sort of crude Photoshop, crude meaning the way it was designed, just in the sense of like, I wasn't good at Photoshop. So it was like, it didn't look great, but it was always like helping my point come across. And then, one day I got an email that was like, hey, we're done with freelance writers. We're just going to stay in-house. Thank you for your service. Goodbye. Wow. And I like panicked because I was like, I'm still working my sales job. This was not a full-time thing by any means. But I wanted to continue to try to grow my place in that career. So I just was like, do you need multimedia help? And they were like, actually we do. And so it was literally a moment of trying to like survival mode.
Stay alive. Yeah.
What can I do here? And so I started to do that. And once I started to like lean into that creatively, I started to make some videos that kind of started going viral, that people really enjoyed, and stuff that you probably see a lot of now that might even be old. But at the time, not a lot of people were doing it. It was like mashing up, trailers with players. I'll never forget this one. It was about Russell Westbrook, like prime
Russ.
Animal Russell Westbrook, and it was called Point Godzilla because Chris Paul at the time was called the point guard.
Yeah.
Point God. And I was like, Russ is Point Godzilla. He is just a machine, like the animal. He screams after dunks and things like that. So I combined that trailer. I remember that went super viral for Grantland. And so I did a lot of stuff like that. And then when Bill left Grantland, and started The Ringer, I was like one of the first phone calls. I was one of the very first hired. I was a day one Ringer guy. And that's how I wound up at The Ringer.
Fire stuff here from Jason Gallagher. Jason, so before we transition a little bit, I want to just tap into that aspect of the creative side for you, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you turn that on? Like, how do you look at something like this is a spin I'm going to take? Because everyone's scrolling social media, seeing things, whatever, but how do you say, you know what, let me try this? And I'm sure you obviously had, let's just say obviously, but everybody's had some failures and things that didn't take off in the way that you wanted it to. But that creative mind, like how did you develop that in the way that it has gone so well for you?
I've absolutely had more failures than successes for sure. But you really have to have a short mindset about it. I mean, being inspired by the artistic side of myself has a lot of people in sports media don't come at it from that way. And that's not to say it's a bad thing, but I think it's kind of just allowed me to sort of naturally look at things differently. So like I used to say that whenever I would make something for The Ringer or whatever, or even Twitter or their social media, I would say like, this is like a stand-up comedy like thing, like where you just go and you try stuff out every day. And then you learn from it, and then you have a short memory, and then you move on. And that short memory is really, really helpful. And so that's kind of was a huge, just like very informative for how we do, I make stuff like that. But in terms of my creative, like Bill was very influential because the way he only really responded to the stuff I made that was like really weird or really out there or really different. And I noticed he was a great mentor in the sense that he was always sort of trying to look for things that didn't exist already. And I think that helped me by trying to sort of like seek that approval from him.
Yeah.
That helped me think in that way. And then that became like a guiding light. Like, how can we do things differently? How can we, even not to fast forward or derail this interview, but even looking at the player pod space now, which is extremely oversaturated, how do you create a look and a vibe that's actually different? It's something that I'm always trying to ask myself. What doesn't exist? What does exist that could use a revamp? What is this? And that to me is very important. And then when it comes to the creative side, it's just keep making stuff for yourself that you enjoy. Like really staying true to that. I just truly believe, like, sometimes I will be like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever made. It makes me laugh. And also don't take the internet too seriously, because it's just the internet. It's just going to, if you make something so stupid and everybody hates you, they're going to move on in 5 seconds because something else gets them out. You know what I mean? Yeah. Anyway, so that's kind of how I approach the kind of creative process.
I think valuable insight for anybody listening, and just kind of understanding, believing in yourself. And I think as a content creator, it is that, like, it usually does start like, hey, make content that you like, and then
like, not to cut you off, but like, one of the more successful shows we did was NBA Desktop. And that's the show that we were nominated for a few Emmys for. We were lucky enough to win. Yep. And a huge part of that at the time, again, now everything's on Zoom, it's a little different. But at the time, the only thing sports media was glossy sets, big cameras, big productions. And what was funny to me was a lot of these companies, as ESPN included, whatever, as they are transitioning into digital, hadn't really spoken the digital language. And that was something that was like really, really important to me, was like, hey, we're the Ringer. We're an internet site, and we have big glossy cameras, and we had TriCasters, we had massive studio boards and everything like that. And I remember me and partner in this endeavor, Jason Concepcion, were like, we don't want any of that, because the reality is the internet doesn't work that way. And so we actually like voluntarily chose this closet to tape in, because I wanted it to feel small, intimate. We taped it on my iPhone, and we taped it, and again, right now you can see me, but we taped it chest up. We made it vlog style. And we did this sports show that was a little bit more vloggy. And there were very few people doing that in sports media. That's just sort of another example of just trying to find those holes in the market. So, yeah.
I think very well said again, as always. Here we're chatting with Jason Gallagher, Emmy winning, producer, great talent here in the media space here on Dope Interviews. Let's take a quick break, y'all, and we'll be right back.
Yo, what's up? I'm Desmond, and I'm the host of Hip to the Games, a podcast from 19 Media Group, where the brilliance of basketball and hip-hop's past and present is genuinely appreciated. Join me every other Friday as we celebrate some of the greatest artists, albums, moments, songs, bars, punchlines, NBA teams, players, just anything and everything to do with the game of rap and the game of basketball. See, if you like basketball and hip-hop, that means you're hip to the games. But no matter where you fall on that spectrum, I encourage you to join the fun every other Friday on your favorite podcast platform, courtesy of the great 19 Media Group.
And we're back here in Dope Interviews with my guy, Jason Gallagher. I'm calling him my guy now. I feel like I've learning so much about him. I've been following him on Twitter for a very long time. I've been a fan of his work for even longer than that. Jason, so you touched on a couple of things here in the first half of the show, especially when you talked about the player empowerment era, the player podcast. Obviously, we're on a podcast here now. I have a basketball podcast, and while I love our players, yeah, it's a tough situation for guys like me right now, because hey, you'd much rather listen to a story about guys in the locker room than maybe me and my friend talking about X's and O's. However, I got to ask you this question. So, Old Man and Three, fire podcast. One of the ones that, and when it comes to the player empowerment era in terms of the media space, I was like, well, this one's good. this one just stick around. So you got involved in that. How do you get that job? I can't imagine this is on Indeed or LinkedIn. Like, how do you get into a conversation with JJ Redick to, kind of say, you know what, I want to produce your podcast?
Yeah. So I think one of the things we hadn't really touched on, we've touched a lot on creative, and I think briefly saying that my work ethic is I have a lot of conviction in my work ethic. I try to do the best jobs I possibly can, but a really underrated part to, I think, being successful in this industry is trying to be a really nice person and try to be really good. And especially if you're in a producer role, it's actually a little bit of a sacrificial role in some ways. And so embracing that and being the best sort of steward to the project that you possibly can, and that's been consistent, whether it be stage, but anything. It's always like recognize the talent, support the talent, guide the talent, all that other stuff. And so the person that I became fast friends with at The Ringer, who was at The Ringer at the time, was a guy named Tommy Alter, who was co-host with JJ Redick. Tommy Alter at the time was Bill Simmons's guest booker. Okay. But he and I got along, and Tommy's the most well-connected human being you'll ever meet. He knows everyone. He can get you in at any game, any concert, whatever. But I just kind of became friends with him, and I was very nice to him, and he was very nice to me. And it was not a transactional relationship. It was like we recognized each other's talent. We would get lunch. We would talk. That was it. And so JJ actually had his podcast at The Ringer, but was not doing it very frequently. And to be honest, was not being executed in the way that I thought could maximize its potential. Right. And so we sort of I actually weirdly started working on that show without ever getting to know JJ. I was doing some video for The Ringer and actually using the assets from that and being like, what could we do on this YouTube page? And if you go to The Ringer's YouTube page today, I'm very proud to say that a bunch of the best videos, like most viewed videos ever made, were from that JJ podcast and that, few month period where we were really trying to focus on video. But we saw something there. And it's something that, as JJ has said in the past, which is video goes viral, audio doesn't really go viral. So when you're starting a new podcast, that's such an essential thing to think about when you're trying to, find eyeballs and ears and all that other stuff. So Tommy approached me and said, JJ wants to own his own content. I think we were all pretty happy at The Ringer, but it's JJ wanted to own his own content. And we had just sold to Spotify, and I just sort of had this sort of revelation that I don't know why, but I just really feel like personal brands are almost the new brand. Like they just, like, if you can attach yourself to somebody who feels like there's a lot of upside, then do it, because that to me can be in itself its own business. So whenever I was approached to it, I actually, we kind of did like a trial run, and I started their YouTube page or whatever, and it just went like this. And obviously, like I said, I operated with a lot of conviction. I attacked the start of that with like a really strong game plan, along with JJ and Tommy. Tommy booked some amazing guests. JJ made time for it. And we went all in, and we made this thing feel really important in a short amount of time. And that's when we knew we had something. And then it took like a year of working on that show until I actually met JJ in Dallas. He was playing for the Mavericks. Funnily enough, Mavericks great, JJ Redick. and we got along instantly. I think that's the most surprising part was, if you have this preconceived notion of who JJ Redick is, you might think he's like this, douchebag from Duke or something. And he and I got along really, really well. And I think a lot of that just had to do with like the fact that we respect how hard we work at our craft. And so, yeah, that's initially how we got started, and it took off like a rocket ship. It was the best job ever. So
yeah, I know it absolutely did. I mean, again, people can go back and listen to all those episodes, and maybe at some point or in off season, I don't know what JJ's plans are. Obviously coaching the Lakers now, a lot of fish in the fryer right now. But you too, you're a busy guy. But question you get asked a lot, and I don't know if you have a unique story that you can share. But when it comes to the Old Man and the Three, is there an episode that means the most to you for whatever reason, or is that's most memorable?
Yeah. There's a couple. I think one of my favorite episode was the second time we interviewed Chris Paul. Chris Paul I don't know him or whatever. I just know his on court persona, and I remember being like, he seems annoying, whatever. And we went to Phoenix to go tape with him, and it was one of the most fun interviews I've ever sat through. And it's just because they're so close, JJ and Chris, and their banter and how funny he was with me. He was giving me crap. Like, it was great. And then afterwards, I was fortunate enough to go to dinner at his house afterwards. And it was myself, JJ, Mikal Bridges was still on the team, so he was there, and Chris. And it was 3 hours of Clippers stories, them just rehashing old Clippers things. Wow. And that was probably my favorite night of ever doing the podcast. I obviously have really great memories. Like, I think the Stephen Curry night that we did, that was really, really fun. And those are really fun because our company was really small and intimate. So it was one of those things where it's like, hey, Stephen Curry is going to give us an hour if we fly to Houston tomorrow. And it's just fun. You rally, and it's like a little bit of Ocean's 11. It's like, how are we going to get there? How are we going to get to the hotel room? What's that going to look like? I'm a producer guy, and I just got all these cameras, and I'm walking into a set that I've never seen before. And I'm going to try to make this hotel room look presentable in 15 minutes. It was fun, and that one was really worthwhile because Steph is, just Steph. He's just so great. And then the last one I want to say is just Luka Doncic, because JJ was nice enough to let me bring my son to that. So I surprised my son. We took a 6 a.m. flight to New York City. We did the Luka interview. My son got to hang out with him, like talk with him. It was really, really cool. And then we flew back that night, and he got to brag to all his friends the next day. It was really cool. So
that's hella dope. So JJ obviously transitioned, from, well, not to say from, but was doing the Old Man 3, and then had a great opportunity to work with LeBron. So, which provides you an opportunity to work with LeBron as well too. So did you have to air quote interview with LBJ, or did JJ Redick just kind of vouch for you? No, he's good. LeBron was he already familiar with your work? Like, talk a little bit about, getting into the Mind podcast.
No. So JJ and LeBron had sort of been having these discussions about how they can work together. LeBron was trying to enter the media space. He didn't want to do so in a traditional way. And so there was kind of this discussion of like, could you get really granular with the game? Can you educate the game and people, enjoy it? Yeah. JJ was able to, and this is something that I'll always be very, very thankful for. He insisted that I was in charge of that project. And Uninterrupted is no small potatoes. Like, it is a big, successful company. Certainly. But he felt, from a player podcast perspective, that I could sort of steward, be a steward to this project and make it exactly what we wanted. And I'm forever grateful for that. So to be able to sort of walk in there and sort of start from nothing and create a vision. And so I didn't have to interview. JJ just insisted, and it was something that I'll be indebted to him for ever.
It was amazing. It was amazing, and kudos to you. And again, it's off the credit of the work that you've been able to produce, and everybody's speaking so highly of the work that you do. Any chance, and I know it's not trade secrets or whatever, but any chance it comes back even as an off-season limited series? Like, what's the situation there with Mind the Game?
I think there's a pretty good chance it comes back in some capacity. I don't think JJ will ever be a part of it, at least not in the current situation. As his friend, I've advised him, don't do podcasts. Some people have been like, well, coaches, they go on the interview, or they go on the radio like once a week. And I'm like, yeah, but they're not hired directly from podcasts. So if I were him, whatever, and he has no interest in doing it. He's so freaking invested in what he's got going on right now. So, yeah, but I truly don't know the future of Mind the Game. But I have a feeling it's going to come back in some iteration. So.
Well, with you at the helm, I'm sure it'll be successful. Couple last ones, Jason, before we ride out into the proverbial sunset. Earlier, you touched on kind of like the emerging trends. We've had those conversations about players getting into this space. Your thoughts just in general, right? And of what that is and where that can potentially go. Players telling their own stories and whatever platforms that they choose to engage in. A lot different from the times it seems like you and I kind of were growing up in. And now we're in this space where it's a mixed bag a little bit, wouldn't you say?
Oh, totally. Yeah. And look, like anything, something successful, what's going to come out of that is a lot of copycats, a lot of innovation, a lot of stuff. Like, I think we've only sort of scratched the surface of what these sort of player-led media entities can produce. And so, that's not just like, I think it's a great thing. The oversaturation part of it is just like, hey, guys, once I've gotten to sort of know players, I mean, they're like us. They play basketball and then they need to fill their time. They want to do stuff and they retire early. So they want to figure out what to do afterwards. This is a great model. I think what I'm excited for is sort of like, what else can they sort of disrupt? And I think that that's going to happen. It's like, we have players sitting around on couches talking, and we have, that, but we don't have the true, like, freaking around the horn hosted by two active players with graphics sitting at a table, looking at each other, arguing. Like, how else could they disrupt the industry? And I would also say that, because I have a lot of friends and, sort of like that are not athletes that are in this space. Sure. And I just always say it too, man, like, talent wins. Like, I really truly believe that talent wins, knowledge wins. I think we're in an economy right now that really craves knowledge, like really craves it. And I view that across the board, not just sports, but like, there's a reason why, like, people who are like experts at like plant life, like, go viral every day on TikTok, because they're just really knowledgeable about the subject, and people crave knowledge. So I tell that to my sports media friends all the time is I don't think that this pushes anyone out. If you're driven to create really good content, it's going to be there. So, like, the audience is there. I don't think you necessarily need an ESPN to, kind of control your own future and destiny in this industry. So I'm really excited to see where the athlete stuff goes, though, because and I'm hoping to be a part of it, hoping to be a part of how that continues to grow.
Well, that's humble as hell. Hoping to. I'm sure you're turning down projects, on a regular basis, I think, at this stage, which is a great place to be in. But your humility is one that's resonating here, I think, with me, and I'm sure with people who have come into contact with you. That aspect of, even when I got into, as small as it's been in the writing space, it was first said to me like, hey, all of this is like, it's all relationships. And you touched on that earlier. And so being able to be humble, understand what can I do for you, and not always like, just trying to get out ahead. Relationships need to be mutually beneficial, and I think there's a lot of takers in this world. So the more that you can kind of be givers, the longer runway I think you'll have in that. So, but as we're talking about the player space, there's still the aspect of people want to know the behind the scenes. Like, that is stuff that is still a lot of craving. People are craving in a wide way, rather. So you have a new project, on ESPN, that you're a part of. So humble again, as we were talking, and I was like, oh, and I saw it, and I was like, oh, he retweeted. I was like, is he a part of that? And then come to find out, you actually are. So ESPN clutched the NBA playoffs, behind the scenes look basically of the 2024 playoffs, correct? Talk to us a little bit about that. How'd you get involved, and the kind of the joy that you had working with some of that.
Yeah, it was really cool. I was a part of it from like a very top line sort of way. So essentially what had happened was, there's a company called Fullwell Productions, which if you Google them, they basically do everything you watch. They are like the craziest production company. They do everything. And they're a British based company. And they actually started doing soccer documentaries, and they do a lot of successful soccer documentaries. Sunderland Till I Die, Champions of the World, followed the World Cup. These are like really successful on Netflix and stuff like that. And they had, have an agreement to do this documentary with the NBA. And what was really funny is they were like, well, we're soccer guys. They were like, we don't know anything about basketball. So they actually came to 342. the owner of that company had a relationship with JJ, came to 342 and was like, we need your knowledge. We need your expertise. And that's really was sort of our involvement, was to just simply say, like, you need to capture this part of the playoffs, because there's another documentary that's really good. A lot of my friends are working on it. Highly recommend that too. It's called Starting Five.
Starting Five, yep.
It's on Netflix. And what that focuses on are these 5 individuals, which is like equally as fascinating to me. I think our approach and what JJ and I have always believed, and why I think JJ probably was a really great partner for this, is that he's always wanted to stress just how much of a team sport this is. And if you're talking about the playoffs, it goes so far beyond that. It's like the team is not just the guys on the roster. It's actually the staff, and it's the people that work at the arena. And then it extends out to one of the storylines that I was really helpful in, just sort of like, trying to craft, was like Oklahoma City is a great example. The growth of this team actually is embedded in the government and the local businesses and everything like that, because it is a small market. All of that stuff has to be invested in order for the team to work. And that to me is where this docuseries is, I think, pretty fascinating, is to sort of take a holistic approach about, hey, what does it mean for teams to be successful in the playoffs? What does it mean for the communities? What does it mean for the players? What does it mean for the families? That's why we spend time with like a lot of families. We spend time, like Darren Fox's wife. We had a camera on her the whole time when she was in. We have guys that we haven't. It hasn't aired yet, so I don't want to spoil anything. But we're with people's families as they're watching these guys go through this. We're with the community. We're with the mayor of the city as he's watching. Like, this dictates the future of our city, that kind of thing. And so, I think it's a really cool project. I hope you check it out. It's great.
Yeah, I absolutely did check out the first episode. Can't wait to see what's next, and eagerly anticipating the Starting 5 as well too. I mean, again, anything that's well produced in this way, and it gives us a behind the scenes look. And hey, selfishly, the Celtics won the championship, so I can't be mad at any type of look behind that. JT's on the Starting 5
of the finale, brother. I'm gonna skip it, but you're gonna.
I can't wait. I need to hit you up. I need it now. I need to get some screeners in my life or something like that. I've been consuming Celtics content all summer. But Jason, last two, just what personal goals for yourself? What's next for you here? Obviously, you have all these great projects, all these great connections, well liked, well received, humble individual. Hey, what's next, man?
Yeah, what's next is, again, trying to push the space forward. Even as I've sort of evaluated, hey, what's the next thing? Trying to push the space forward, trying to provide for my family, but also then trying to, I like to stay uncomfortable, and I like to stretch myself a little bit and try to, do things that are challenging. And so that's kind of what I'm hoping to do. And in doing that, hopefully, again, pushing the space forward. I can't really talk about some of the future things that I'm doing right now because they're in the middle of contract negotiations. But my hope is that within a week or two, we have some really exciting things on the horizon that I'm really, really excited about. I don't think it's a giving anything away, because we've said it very publicly. But what we've built at the Old Man and the Three, we're hoping to really transition into something pretty exciting and cool. So I'm hoping to be a part of that. And that proceeds. And so, yeah, I don't know, just staying happy, staying creative. That's my hope.
And it's definitely going well for you. And then, the final one, as a dad, right? You being able to be kind of like that light, that inspiration, for your kid. Just as your family, like, how supportive are they and understanding? Because these are a lot of long nights, long hours, vacations and travel, not vacations, but being away from the house. And, I'm sure you've missed some things as well too. How do you balance all of that to keep the family unit kind of intact?
Yeah, that is an amazing question. And I have been thinking about that a lot. I had an Uber driver ask me a very similar question last week, and we wound up talking for like an hour. But so I don't want to take an hour of your time here, but I will say that my family, keeping them the priority has allowed me to sort of make decisions that I think are really right. There is a balance. There is an uncomfortable time. Playoffs are really difficult, and it's about really segmenting your time. I think anybody in this industry would just say, when you're off, be off. When you're on, be on. But when you're off, be off, and make sure those off times are reserved and you're actually taking advantage of it, because it in digital especially, it's really tempting to stay glued to your laptop and your phone. And one of the things that I remember reading about, I think it was Bob Iger's book, but he essentially talked about, when you wake up, make sure looking at your phone is not the first thing you do. When you go to bed, make sure looking at your phone is not the last thing you do, because that's stuff that you really can control, and you can control how you approach a day in that perspective. So that's something I've been working on the last couple of years, is just waking up, walking downstairs, hanging with the kid, hanging with the wife, getting coffee, because if I don't see it, it doesn't exist. If the problem isn't in my face, then it doesn't exist. And so that's something that's just really important. And I would just say too, like, this whole industry is not to get super, it's a cruel industry at times. And it is, things are fleeting. I'm having a nice time right now. 10 years from now, who knows? Zach Lowe just got let go at ESPN.
Yeah.
These are things, and that is somebody I've idolized my whole life. So this industry, it takes, it gives, it does all that. It's great. It can also spit you out. You just never know. And the thing that's always going to be there for you is your family. And so investing in that part of your life, as much as you're investing in your career, I wholeheartedly recommend.
I couldn't say it better myself. My wife tells me all the time, like, hey, how about over here? When I grab my phone sometimes, or even if it's just to turn off the alarm, like, I don't get caught in like scrolling and what the case to be. No, pay attention to the family, your loved ones. I think that is expertly and poignantly well said. Great place for us to wrap, and hopefully some meat on the bone for a future conversation down the line. Jason, tell the people where they can find you on social media.
Yeah, so on X, you can just search my name. I have a weird handle that has Dirk Nowitzki's number on it, so you can search my name. You'll see my face, and then on Instagram, it's Jason Gallagher 41, of course. So yeah, man, just follow my stuff there. We got some exciting stuff here before the season starts, so I'm excited.
Absolutely. Again, he is Jason Gallagher, amazing gentleman here in this media space, doing amazing, great projects, stuff you already have known, and some stuff you're going to become familiar with here. Make sure you check out Clutch, the NBA playoffs on ESPN. I'm Warren Shaw. You can hit me up at Shaw Sports NBA or dope_interviews. And as always, you know what it is. It's been another dope interview, y'all, from my guy, Jason Gallagher. And we're out.
Together we stand, divided we never. The vision is one, striving for the better. Working as a team, working toward a dream. It's not even work when the team is the dream. On a united front, we got our own back. A band of brothers to counteract any attack. One heart in fact, forget what the blood say. Dope is what flows in this fam's DNA. So let's do it for the love, give to the max. Listen to opinion, but react to facts. And remember that together with a but separate, just pieces of it. Dope is what flows in this fam's DNA. Dope is what flows in this fam's DNA.
Family represent like a tree with names on it. We're free, no chains on it. Relieved, the pain's gone, I can see. We come together like questions on the quiz. Mojo Flow and Viz, man, you know what it is. And if ignorance is bliss, you're gonna hate this lesson. Organized intellect like a tropical depression. My symbol is the cross, a mic and ghost peppers. Cause I'm just a black sheep growing up to be a shepherd. Moonlighting as a weapon to protect the children. Every brother is a father, dynasties we're building. Max, J and K, Bebe and Isaiah, next level of the family foundation, understand me?